I gave all the money from my father to my wife. My son Ryan said those words with a smile on his face, holding a glass of expensive champagne in my cramped-smelling living room. He looked at my sister Valerie, and then at me, thinking I was just a senile old man who did not understand what was happening. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully stolen my life savings, my house, and my dignity. What he did not know was that the woman sitting next to me was not just a confused old aunt, but a retired forensic accountant with 40 years of experience hunting down fraud. And he certainly did not know that the pen in my pocket was recording every single word. That night, I did not just lose a son, I took back my life. But before I tell you how I brought his world crashing down, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. It brings me a lot of joy to see how far my story travels. It all started on a freezing Tuesday night in November. My name is Martin. I am 70 years old. For 40 years, I walked through the security gates at Lockheed Martin as a senior aerospace engineer. I designed guidance systems for satellites that orbit the Earth. I calculated trajectories that required precision down to the millimeter. I solved problems that kept pilots safe in the sky. When I retired, my pension was set at $15,000 a month. By all accounts, I should be spending my twilight years on the deck of a cruise ship or playing golf on a green course in Florida. I should be drinking fine wine and worrying about nothing more than my handicap. Instead, I was standing in the kitchen of a dilapidated rental apartment on the outskirts of Phoenix, shivering in the dark. The only light in the room came from a flickering street lamp outside that cast long prison bar shadows through the dirty window blinds. I wrapped my thin wool cardigan tighter around my chest, trying to stop the trembling in my hands. The window frame was cracked, and a sharp, cold draft whistled through it, biting at my skin. I reached out and opened the refrigerator door. The light inside the fridge had died 3 days ago, so I had to squint to see what was left. Inside, there was a single container of vanilla yogurt that had expired last Tuesday, and a dried-up block of cheddar cheese that looked more like a rock than food. That was it. That was everything I had to eat. I closed the door and looked at the small, wobbly table in the center of the room. There, glowing menacingly in the dim light, was a bright red piece of paper. It was a final disconnection notice from the electric company. I owed them $180. The deadline was tomorrow at noon. If I did not pay the heater, the fridge and the lights would all go out. I pulled out a wooden chair and sat down heavily. The wood creaked under my weight. How did it come to this? My wife Diane passed away 2 years ago. We had saved everything. We had paid off our family home. We had a diverse investment portfolio. I have a pension that most people would kill for. Yet here I am, a man who used to manage multi-million-dollar budgets, calculating if I can survive another night without heat. My stomach growled a painful hollow sound that echoed in the quiet room. I was hungry. Not the kind of hungry you feel when you skip lunch, but the deep gnawing hunger of someone who has been rationing food for weeks. I closed my eyes and saw images of my past. I saw myself in a suit shaking hands with generals. I saw Diane laughing in our beautiful kitchen, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. I saw the pride in my eyes when I looked at my bank account balance. And then I opened my eyes and saw the stained linoleum floor of this apartment. Suddenly, a familiar tightening gripped my chest. It started as a dull ache and quickly sharpened into a squeezing pain. My heart condition. I needed my medication. I stood up feeling dizzy and walked to the bathroom cabinet. I grabbed the orange bottle of lisinopril and my blood thinner. I shook the bottle. It was light. Too light. I opened it and poured the contents into my hand. Dust. It was empty. I had taken the last pill yesterday morning. Panic began to set in. Cold, hard panic. I needed that medicine. Without it, my heart was a ticking time bomb. I checked my wallet. I had $3.25 in change. That was not even enough for a bottle of aspirin, let alone prescription heart medication. I had no choice. I had to swallow my pride. I had to beg. My hand shook as I reached for my old flip phone on the counter. I dialed the number I knew by heart. Ryan. My son. My only child. The financial expert who had promised to take care of everything. I listened to the ringtone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I prayed he would pick up. I prayed he would hear the desperation in my voice. Then the voicemail clicked on. You have reached Ryan and Megan. We are out living our best lives right now, or we are on a plane to somewhere fabulous. Leave a message and we will get back to you when we land. The beep sounded. I held the phone to my ear, tears stinging my eyes. I pictured them. Ryan in his expensive suit, Megan with her designer bags, laughing, drinking, living off the hard work of my life, while I stood here in the cold. Ryan, I whispered into the phone, my voice cracking. It is your father. Ryan, please pick up. I am hungry, son. The fridge is empty. And the electric company sent a red notice. They are going to cut the power tomorrow. Ryan, I am out of my heart medicine. My chest hurts. Please, son, call me back. I just need a little bit of my own money. Just enough for food and pills. Please. I hung up the phone and stared at it, willing it to ring back. But the screen stayed dark. The silence in the apartment was heavy, suffocating. I was alone. I was 70 years old, a former senior engineer, a man of respect, and I was going to freeze to death in a dark apartment because my son was too busy living his best life to answer my call. I sat there for a long time, the cold seeping into my bones. I thought about the power of attorney I had signed. I thought about how Ryan had told me, Dad, you are grieving Mom. You do not need the stress of bills and taxes. Let me handle it. I am a finance professional. I will protect your legacy. I had trusted him. He was my blood. He was the little boy I had taught to ride a bike. He was the young man I had sent to college. How could he let this happen? The pain in my chest flared again, sharper this time. I could not wait for a callback. I needed to do something. I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and walked out the door. My 1998 Ford Taurus was parked on the street. It was rusted, and the engine coughed and sputtered before finally turning over. I did not have enough gas to drive to Ryan's house in Scottsdale. I barely had enough to get to the grocery store, but I had to try. Maybe the card would work this time. Maybe it was just a glitch yesterday. Maybe Ryan had transferred my allowance. I drove to the nearest grocery store, a Fry's Food, a few miles down the road. I did not go to the Whole Foods where I used to shop with Diane. I could not afford to even look at those prices anymore. I walked the aisles, keeping my head down. I did not want anyone to see me. I looked at the prices of everything. A loaf of bread, $2. A can of generic soup, $1.50. A small jar of peanut butter, $3. I did the math in my head. I picked up the soup and the bread. It was not a meal for a king, but it would stop the shaking in my hands. I walked to the checkout line. The cashier was a young girl snapping gum, looking bored. She scanned my 2 items. That will be $3.50, sir, she said, not even looking at me. I pulled out my debit card. The blue one Ryan had given me. He told me this was for my weekly allowance. I swiped it through the machine. My heart pounded in my ears as I waited. Please work. Please work. A loud beep echoed through the quiet store. I looked at the small screen. Declined. My face felt hot. Shame washed over me like a wave. I think there is a mistake, I stammered, my voice trembling. Can you try it again? Please. My son, he usually puts money in on Tuesdays. The woman standing in line behind me sighed loudly. She checked her watch and tapped her foot. Come on, Grandpa, some of us have places to be. The cashier rolled her eyes and took the card from my hand. She wrapped it in a plastic bag and typed the numbers in manually. "Declined," she said louder this time. "Insufficient funds, sir." I stood there frozen. $3.50. I did not have $3.50. I was a man who had designed satellite trajectories, and now I could not buy a loaf of bread. "I am sorry," I whispered. I looked at the soup. I looked at the bread. I wanted to grab them and run, but I still had my dignity, or at least the shreds of it. I left the items on the counter. I turned around and walked out of the store, my head bowed low. The automatic doors slid shut behind me, sealing me out in the cold night. I got back into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down my face. This was not a glitch. This was not a mistake. Ryan was controlling everything. He was starving me. I looked at the fuel gauge. It was almost on empty. I had enough gas for maybe 20 miles. Ryan's house was 15 miles away. I wiped my tears. I was done begging over the phone. I was done leaving voicemails. If my son wanted to ignore me, he was going to have to do it to my face. I put the car in gear. I was going to Scottsdale. I was going to the mansion that my money had paid for, and I was going to get some answers, or at least a meal. The drive to Scottsdale took 40 minutes, and every mile felt like a journey between two different planets. I drove my 1998 Ford Taurus down the highway, the engine rattling and coughing with every acceleration. I watched the landscape change through my dusty windshield. The cracked pavement and chain-link fences of my neighborhood slowly faded away, replaced by smooth, dark asphalt and perfectly manicured desert landscaping. The streetlights here were not flickering or broken. They were elegant, casting a warm golden glow on the palm trees that lined the streets. I turned into the gated community where my son lived. I punched in the code at the security gate, my fingers trembling slightly. It was the birthday of his wife. That was the code. I drove through the winding streets, passing houses that looked more like resorts than homes. Finally, I pulled up to the address I knew so well. It was not just a house. It was a fortress. It was a sprawling, modern desert mansion with floor-to-ceiling glass windows and stone walls that shimmered in the evening light. Ryan and Megan had bought it last year. They called it their dream home. I looked at it, and I felt a wave of nausea because I knew exactly whose money had paid for that down payment. And there, sitting in the circular driveway like a predator waiting to pounce, was a brand-new white Maserati Ghibli. The paint was flawless, gleaming under the porch lights. I pulled my rusted, dented Ford right up behind it. The contrast was so sharp it almost physically hurt. My car looked like a pile of scrap metal next to a spaceship. I saw movement in the front yard. The landscaping lights were on, illuminating the cactus garden. Megan was there. She was standing with her arms crossed, pointing a finger at a cactus, directing a team of 3 landscapers who were working late. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though it was night, and a pristine white tennis outfit that looked like it had never seen a drop of sweat or a speck of dirt. I turned off my engine. It died with a loud shudder. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. "Ryan!" I called out, my voice raspy from crying. "Ryan, get out here!" Megan lowered her sunglasses and looked at me. There was no warmth in her eyes, no concern. She looked at me the way one looks at a stray dog that has wandered onto a freshly cut lawn. "Martin," she said, her voice dripping with annoyance. "What are you doing here? You're scaring the workers." I ignored her. I walked toward the massive front door. Before I could reach it, it swung open. Ryan stepped out. He was wearing a fitted polo shirt and holding an iPad, looking every inch the successful professional. "Dad," he said, frowning. "What is wrong? Why are you shouting in the driveway?" I stopped in front of him. I was shaking partly from the cold I still felt in my bones and partly from rage. My card, I said, holding up the useless piece of plastic. I was at the grocery store, Ryan. It was declined. For $3.50. I tried to buy soup and bread, and the power company sent a disconnection notice. They are cutting my lights tomorrow at noon. Ryan sighed. It was a long, dramatic sigh, the kind a parent gives a toddler who is throwing a tantrum. He walked down the steps and put a hand on my shoulder, guiding me away from the workers and his wife. Dad, calm down, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. You are overreacting. I told you about this. The markets are extremely volatile right now. We moved your liquidity into secure trust funds. They have lockup periods. It is for your own protection. We cannot just pull cash out whenever we want. Protection. I asked, my voice rising. I am starving, Ryan. I am cold. I have no heart medication. How is that protection? He looked around nervously to see if the landscapers were watching. It is just a banking glitch, he said, dismissing my pain with a wave of his hand. The transfers take time to clear. Look, it is handled. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wallet. It was made of crocodile skin. I recognized the brand. It cost more than my monthly food budget used to be. He opened it, and I saw it was thick with cash. Crisp new bills. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and shoved them into my hand. Here, he said. This is my fault. I forgot to transfer your weekly stipend manually. Take this. Go get some food. I will call the power company personally in the morning. It is handled. Okay. Everything is under control. I looked down at the money in my hand. $500. It felt heavy. It felt dirty. This was my money. I had earned it with 40 years of calculations and stress and early mornings. And now my son was handing it to me like an allowance, like charity. Megan walked over, swinging a Chanel bag over her shoulder. I knew that bag. I knew it cost $7,000 because I had seen a similar charge on a statement months ago before Ryan stopped showing them to me. Martin, honestly, she said, flashing a tight, fake smile that did not reach her eyes. You nearly gave Ryan a heart attack storming in here like this. We are working so hard to protect your legacy. Do not you remember? You signed the power of attorney. My mind flashed back to 2 years ago. The funeral. The grief was a fog so thick I could not see my own hands. I was broken. Ryan had put a stack of papers in front of me on the kitchen table. Sign this, Dad, he had said gently. I will handle the taxes, the bills, the investments. You just grieve. You just rest. Mom would want you to rest. I had signed. I did not read a single line. I trusted him. He is my son. He is the only thing I have left of Diane. I remember, I said weakly. Exactly, Megan said, nodding, as if she were talking to a slow child. So go home. Rest. Let the experts handle the money. Ryan will fix the power. She turned her back on me and started typing on her phone. Ryan patted my shoulder one last time and then looked back at his iPad. Go get a good meal, Dad, he said, distracted. We will talk later. I stood there for a moment in the driveway of the fortress my money had built. I looked at the Maserati. I looked at my son and his wife. They had already forgotten I was there. To them, I was just a problem to be managed, an interruption to be silenced with cash. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I turned around and walked back to my rusted Ford Taurus. I climbed in and threw the $500 on the passenger seat. I felt small. I felt stupid. But as I drove away, passing through the security gate, a voice in my head started to whisper. He is a finance professional, I told myself. He knows better than me. But the doubt was there now. It was a small, cold seed planted in my chest, right next to the pain in my heart. And as I drove back into the darkness of my side of town, I knew deep down that $500 was not going to fix what was broken. The drive to Scottsdale took 40 minutes, and every mile felt like a journey between two different planets. I drove my 1998 Ford Taurus down the highway, the engine rattling and coughing with every acceleration. I watched the landscape change through my dusty windshield. The cracked pavement and chain-link fences of my neighborhood slowly faded away, replaced by smooth, dark asphalt and perfectly manicured desert landscaping. The streetlights here were not flickering or broken. They were elegant, casting a warm golden glow on the palm trees that lined the streets. I turned into the gated community where my son lived. I punched in the code at the security gate, my fingers trembling slightly. It was the birthday of his wife. That was the code. I drove through the winding streets, passing houses that looked more like resorts than homes. Finally, I pulled up to the address I knew so well. It was not just a house. It was a fortress. It was a sprawling, modern desert mansion with floor-to-ceiling glass windows and stone walls that shimmered in the evening light. Ryan and Megan had bought it last year. They called it their dream home. I looked at it, and I felt a wave of nausea because I knew exactly whose money had paid for that down payment. And there, sitting in the circular driveway like a predator waiting to pounce, was a brand new white Maserati Ghibli. The paint was flawless, gleaming under the porch lights. I pulled my rusted, dented Ford right up behind it. The contrast was so sharp, it almost physically hurt. My car looked like a pile of scrap metal next to a spaceship. I saw movement in the front yard. The landscaping lights were on, illuminating the cactus garden. Megan was there. She was standing with her arms crossed, pointing a finger at a cactus, directing a team of 3 landscapers who were working late. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though it was night, and a pristine white tennis outfit that looked like it had never seen a drop of sweat or a speck of dirt. I turned off my engine. It died with a loud shudder. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. "Ryan," I called out, my voice raspy from crying. "Ryan, get out here." Megan lowered her sunglasses and looked at me. There was no warmth in her eyes, no concern. She looked at me the way one looks at a stray dog that has wandered onto a freshly cut lawn. "Martin," she said, her voice dripping with annoyance. "What are you doing here? You are scaring the workers." I ignored her. I walked toward the massive front door. Before I could reach it, it swung open. Ryan stepped out. He was wearing a fitted polo shirt and holding an iPad, looking every inch the successful professional. "Dad," he said, frowning. "What is wrong? Why are you shouting in the driveway?" I stopped in front of him. I was shaking partly from the cold I still felt in my bones and partly from rage. "My card," I said, holding up the useless piece of plastic. "I was at the grocery store, Ryan. It was declined. For $3.50. I tried to buy soup and bread. And the power company sent a disconnection notice. They are cutting my lights tomorrow at noon." Ryan sighed. It was a long, dramatic sigh, the kind a parent gives a toddler who is throwing a tantrum. He walked down the steps and put a hand on my shoulder, guiding me away from the workers and his wife. "Dad." "Dad, calm down," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "You are overreacting. I told you about this. The markets are extremely volatile right now. We moved your liquidity into secure trust funds. They have lockup periods. It is for your own protection. We cannot just pull cash out whenever we want." "Protection?" I asked, my voice rising. "I am starving, Ryan. I am cold. I have no heart medication. How is that protection?" He looked around nervously to see if the landscapers were watching. "It is just a banking glitch," he said, dismissing my pain with a wave of his hand. "The transfers take time to clear. Look, it is handled." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wallet. It was made of crocodile skin. I recognized the brand. It cost more than my monthly food budget used to be. He opened it, and I saw it was thick with cash. Crisp new bills. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and shoved them into my hand. "Here," he said. This is my fault. I forgot to transfer your weekly stipend manually. Take this. Go get some food. I will call the power company personally in the morning. It is handled. Okay. Everything is under control. I looked down at the money in my hand. $500. It felt heavy. It felt dirty. This was my money. I had earned it with 40 years of calculations and stress and early mornings. And now my son was handing it to me like an allowance, like charity. Megan walked over, swinging a Chanel bag over her shoulder. I knew that bag. I knew it cost $7,000 because I had seen a similar charge on a statement months ago before Ryan stopped showing them to me. Martin, honestly, she said, flashing a tight, fake smile that did not reach her eyes. You nearly gave Ryan a heart attack storming in here like this. We are working so hard to protect your legacy. Do not you remember you signed the power of attorney? My mind flashed back to 2 years ago. The funeral. The grief was a fog so thick I could not see my own hands. I was broken. Ryan had put a stack of papers in front of me on the kitchen table. Sign this, Dad, he had said gently. I will handle the taxes, the bills, the investments. You just grieve. You just rest. Mom would want you to rest. I had signed. I did not read a single line. I trusted him. He is my son. He is the only thing I have left of Diane. I remember, I said weakly. Exactly, Megan said, nodding, as if she were talking to a slow child. So go home. Rest. Let the experts handle the money. Ryan will fix the power. She turned her back on me and started typing on her phone. Ryan patted my shoulder one last time and then looked back at his iPad. Go get a good meal, Dad, he said, distracted. We will talk later. I stood there for a moment in the driveway of the fortress my money had built. I looked at the Maserati. I looked at my son and his wife. They had already forgotten I was there. To them, I was just a problem to be managed, an interruption to be silenced with cash. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I turned around and walked back to my rusted Ford Taurus. I climbed in and threw the $500 on the passenger seat. I felt small. I felt stupid. But as I drove away, passing through the security gate, a voice in my head started to whisper. He is a finance professional, I told myself. He knows better than me. But the doubt was there now. It was a small, cold seed planted in my chest, right next to the pain in my heart. And as I drove back into the darkness of my side of town, I knew deep down that $500 was not going to fix what was broken. The week that followed was a slow, agonizing slide back into the abyss. The $500 Ryan had shoved into my hand, that thick wad of cash that had felt so heavy and dirty, evaporated faster than water on the hot Arizona pavement. I used almost half of it immediately just to pay the minimum balance on the electric bill so the lights would stay on. Then there was the gas for the car, the cheap groceries, a leaky pipe under the sink that needed a $10 part. By Tuesday morning, my wallet was empty again. I was back to zero. And then in the silence of the night, the inevitable happened. It started as a dull pressure in the center of my chest, like a heavy stone resting on my ribs. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself it was just indigestion from the cheap canned soup. But then the stone became a vice. The pressure turned into a sharp, squeezing pain that radiated down my left arm and up into my jaw. I sat up in bed, gasping for air, clutching my chest. My heart was fluttering wildly, a bird trapped in a cage. I knew this feeling. I had lived with this condition for years. It was my heart warning me. I stumbled into the bathroom, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn on the light. I reached for my medication bottles. The lisinopril was there, the cheap generic blood pressure pill. But the other bottle, the crucial one, the blood thinner that prevented the clots from forming and stopping my heart, was empty. I stared at the amber plastic container. It was just a piece of plastic, but in that moment it was the only thing standing between me and the grave. I needed a refill. I needed it now. I grabbed my keys and drove to the 24-hour pharmacy. The drive was a blur of pain and fear. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every breath was a labor. I parked the car crookedly and walked into the bright, sterile light of the drugstore. I handed the empty bottle to the pharmacist. He was a young man with glasses, looking tired. "I need a refill," I wheezed, leaning against the counter for support. "Please, it is an emergency." He typed into his computer. "Okay, Mr. Vance, we have it in stock. That will be $280. $280. It might as well have been $1 million. I pulled out the debit card, the same blue card that had failed me at the grocery store. I prayed. I closed my eyes and prayed to whatever God listens to foolish old men that Ryan had remembered to transfer the money, that he had a heart. I swiped the card. The machine beeped. A harsh electronic rejection. Declined. I stared at the screen. The letters blurred before my eyes. "Try it again." I pleaded, my voice thin and weak. "Please. My son handles my finances. There must be money there." The pharmacist sighed and tried again. Declined. Insufficient funds. I looked at him. I looked at the bottle of pills in his hand. "That bottle was life, sir," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "I am having chest pains. I need that medication. Can you bill me? Can you give me a few pills just to get through the night? I worked for Lockheed Martin for 40 years. I am good for the money." The pharmacist looked at me with pity, but he shook his head. "I am sorry, sir. I cannot do that. The system will not let me release the medication without payment. It is a controlled inventory. There is nothing I can do." He placed the bottle back on the shelf behind him. It was right there, 6 feet away, and it was completely out of reach. I walked out of the pharmacy empty-handed. The cool night air hit my face, but I was sweating. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the pain. And then a thought hit me. It was a cold, terrifying realization that washed over me, chilling me more than the night air ever could. Ryan knew I needed this medicine. He knew the cost. He knew the schedule. He had all my medical records, and he had deliberately left the account empty. Why? The answer came to me with the clarity of a diamond. The trust funds. The complex financial structures he was always talking about. If I was alive, he had to navigate around me. He had to keep up the charade. He had to give me allowances. But if I died, the estate would settle. The trusts would unlock. As my only heir, everything would transfer to him immediately. No more questions. No more annoying phone calls from his father. Just millions of dollars free and clear. My son was not just bad with money. He was waiting for me to die. He was banking on it. He was accelerating it. I felt a shiver run down my spine that had nothing to do with my heart. I was looking into the face of my own murder, and the weapon was not a gun or a knife. It was a declined debit card. It was neglect. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling violently now. I dialed Ryan. It rang. Voicemail. I dialed again. Voicemail. I dialed a third time, a fourth. I called him 20 times in a row. I was screaming inside. Pick up and tell me I am wrong. Pick up and tell me you love me. Pick up and save my life. But there was only silence. The digital silence of a son who had erased his father. I sat there in the dark parking lot, the pain in my chest pulsing in rhythm with my despair. I was going to die here. I was going to die in a 1998 Ford Taurus alone, and broke while my son slept in a mansion I paid for. Number 1. I slammed my hand against the dashboard. Number 1. I would not give him the satisfaction. I would not let him win that easily. I scrolled through my contacts. There were so few left. But there was one name I had avoided for months. One name Ryan had poisoned me against. Valerie, my sister. She lived in Denver. She was a retired chief public accountant. She was sharp, critical, and possessed a tongue like a whip. Ryan hated her. Dad, do not talk to Aunt Val, he had told me 100 times. She is toxic. She is jealous of our success. She just wants to make you doubt me. She is a bitter old woman. I had believed him. I had cut her off to keep the peace. I had let him isolate me. But now, looking at the dark screen of my phone, I realized why he hated her. He did not hate her because she was toxic. He hated her because she was smart. He hated her because she would see right through him. I pressed the call button. It was late, past midnight. She might not answer. She might be angry that I had ignored her for so long. The phone rang once, twice. Martin. Her voice was crisp, alert. She picked up as if she had been waiting by the phone. Valerie, I rasped. Martin, you sound terrible. What is it? Is it your heart? I started to cry. I could not help it. The dam broke. Val, I sobbed. I am in trouble. Talk to me, Martin. What is happening? I am at the pharmacy. My card was declined. I need my blood thinners. My chest hurts, Val. I called Ryan. I called him 20 times. He will not answer. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that felt different from Ryan's silence. This was the silence of a predator assessing a threat. He has your money, she said. It was not a question. Yes. He has everything. Power of attorney, the accounts, everything. He said he invested it. But I have nothing, Val. I am starving. I heard a sound on the other end. The sound of movement, rustling sheets, feet hitting the floor. Martin, listen to me, she said, and her voice was cold, hard steel. Do not call him again. Do not let him know you called me. I do not know what to do. Send me your location, right now. Use the GPS on your phone. Why? Because I am coming to get you. But you are in Denver. I am going to the airport. I will be on the first flight to Phoenix. Val, you do not have to. Shut up, Martin. Just send me the address. Buy the aspirin for now if you have loose change. Chew it. Sit in your car. Lock the doors. Do not die on me, Martin. Do you hear me? Do not you dare die and let that little parasite win. I sent her the location. I put the phone down. I chewed 2 aspirin I found in the glove compartment. And for the first time in months, as I sat there in the dark, waiting for my sister, I felt a tiny spark of something that wasn't fear. It was anger, and it was keeping me alive. The 4 hours I spent waiting for my sister were the longest of my life. I sat in my darkened apartment, listening to the wind rattle the loose window pane, watching the shadows lengthen, and then slowly retreat as the first gray light of dawn began to creep across the floor. I had taken the aspirin as she instructed, and the sharp edge of the chest pain had dulled to a heavy rhythmic throb, but the fear remained. I was terrified that she would not come, or that she would come and see this squalor and leave in disgust. I looked around at the stained walls, the peeling linoleum, the single wobbly chair that constituted my furniture. This was the kingdom of a man who had spent 40 years reaching for the stars, a sad, broken little box at the edge of the desert. At 6 in the morning, a black car pulled up to the curb outside. It was not a regular taxi. It was a high-end sedan, sleek and polished-looking, completely out of place on my cracked street. The driver got out and opened the rear door, and there she was, Valerie. She stepped out onto the dusty pavement with the grace of a queen landing in a war zone. She was 68 years old, but she stood straighter than most people half her age. She was wearing a charcoal gray business suit that looked like it had been tailored in Italy, despite the fact that she had just flown halfway across the country in the middle of the night. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy and expensive. She did not look like a retired aunt coming for a visit. She looked like a general arriving to take command of a losing battlefield. I opened my door and stepped out, shivering in the morning chill. When she saw me, her steps faltered for just a fraction of a second. I knew what she saw. She saw a skeleton of her brother. She saw the hollow cheeks, the gray skin, the clothes that hung loosely on my frame because I had lost 20 pounds in 6 months. "Martin," she said softly. I tried to smile, but my lip trembled. "Val," I said. She did not hug me immediately. Instead, she walked right up to me and placed her hands on my shoulders, gripping me tight, as if checking to see if I was real or if I would crumble under her touch. Her eyes, sharp and blue, scanned my face, cataloging every wrinkle of stress, every sign of neglect. Then, without a word, she pulled me into a fierce embrace. It lasted only a moment, but in that moment I felt a strength I had not felt since Diane died. Then she pulled back, her face setting into a mask of cold determination. "Let us go inside," she said. I led her into the apartment. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to cover her eyes. I did not want her to see the shame I lived in. But she walked past me, the heels of her boots clicking sharply on the dirty floor. She stood in the center of the room and slowly turned in a circle, taking it all in. She looked at the water stains on the ceiling. She looked at the mattress on the floor in the corner, because I had sold the bed frame 3 months ago for grocery money. She looked at the red disconnection notice still sitting on the table. She walked to the kitchen area. It was barely a kitchen, just a sink and a small humming refrigerator. She opened the fridge door. The stale smell of old food wafted out. She stared at the single container of expired yogurt and the dried piece of cheese. She picked up the yogurt, looked at the date, and set it down with a controlled, deliberate movement. Then she turned to me. I expected tears. I expected pity. But Valerie was a chief public accountant for 40 years. She dealt in facts, in numbers, and in accountability. There were no tears in her eyes. There was only a cold, terrifying fury. "Martin," she said, her voice low and steady. "You worked for Lockheed Martin for 4 decades. You were a senior engineer. Your pension is $15,000 a month. That is $180,000 a year net." I nodded, looking at the floor. "Then tell me," she continued, her voice rising slightly, cutting through the air like a knife. "Why are you living like a sewer rat? Why is my brother, a man who built guidance systems for the military, starving in a room that isn't fit for a stray animal?" Ryan said. I started, my voice weak. Ryan said he was investing it. He said the markets were down. He said he had to put it in trusts to protect it from taxes. Investing, she spat the word out as if it tasted like poison. Investing does not mean starving the investor, Martin. Investing means growth. This is not investment. This is liquidation. He is not managing your assets. He is stripping you for parts. She walked over to the table and swept the disconnection notice aside. She placed her leather briefcase on the table and snapped the latches open. The sound was loud in the small room. She pulled out a sleek silver laptop and a mobile hotspot device. "Sit down, Martin," she ordered. I sat on the wobbly chair. She pulled up a second chair, a folding one I kept in the closet, and sat next to me. She opened the laptop and her fingers flew across the keyboard. "I need access to your accounts," she said. "Chase Private Client, right? That is where you and Diane kept the bulk of the savings." "Yes," I said. "Username and password," she demanded. I do not know them," I admitted, the shame burning my face again. Ryan changed them. He said it was for security. He said online banking was too dangerous for me to manage alone. He said I might get scammed. Valerie stopped typing. She slowly turned her head to look at me. Her expression was unreadable, which was more frightening than her anger. "He changed your passwords," she repeated flatly, "to protect you from scams." "Yes." "Martin," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "The scam is not online. The scam is sitting in a mansion in Scottsdale driving a Maserati. He locked you out so you could not see the theft." She pulled out her phone. It was not even 7 in the morning yet. She scrolled through her contacts and pressed a button. She put the phone on speaker and set it on the table between us. It rang for a long time. Finally, a groggy, irritated voice answered. "Hello, who is this?" It was Ryan. "Ryan, this is your Aunt Valerie," she said. There was a pause, a rustling sound, and then Ryan's voice changed. It became smooth, fake, the voice of a salesman caught off guard. "Aunt Val." "Wow, it is early. Is everything okay? I have not heard from you in ages. Dad said you were traveling." "Cut the act," Ryan Valerie said. Her tone was not polite. It was professional and lethal. "I am currently sitting in your father's kitchen in Phoenix. I am looking at an empty refrigerator and a disconnection notice. And I am looking at a man who cannot afford his heart medication despite having a 7-figure net worth." There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, pregnant silence. "Aunt Val, you do not understand." Ryan stammered, the smoothness slipping away. "Dad is confused. He forgets things. I gave him cash last week. He just mismanages it. The markets are complicated right now, and I have moved the assets into long-term vehicles that are illiquid." Valerie laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Do not use buzzwords with me, boy," she said. "I have been auditing Fortune 500 companies since you were in diapers. Illiquid assets do not explain why his checking account is empty. Now listen to me closely, because I am only going to say this once." I watched my sister mesmerized. She seemed to grow larger in the chair. "I want the login credentials for every single account linked to Martin's social security number. I want the Chase accounts, the brokerage accounts, and the pension portal. And I want the PDF statements for the last 24 months sent to my secure email address." "Valerie." "I cannot just give you that," Ryan said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "There are privacy laws. I have power of attorney. I have a fiduciary duty to protect Dad's privacy, even from family." "Fiduciary duty," Valerie repeated. "You want to talk about fiduciary duty? Fine. Let us talk about the law. In the state of Arizona, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a Class 2 felony. It carries a mandatory prison sentence. If I do not have those statements in my inbox in 10 minutes, and I mean 10 minutes, Ryan, I am not calling the bank. I am calling the Phoenix Police Department and the Adult Protective Services. I will file a formal report of elder abuse and grand larceny. I will have them audit every penny you have spent in the last 2 years." I held my breath. I had never heard anyone speak to Ryan like that. He was always the one in control, the one who made people feel small. "You would not," Ryan whispered. "He is my dad." "Try me," Valerie said. "You have 9 minutes left." She hung up the phone. Her hand was steady. She looked at me, and for the first time her expression softened just a fraction. "He is scared, Martin," she said quietly. "People who are managing money correctly do not get scared when an accountant asks to see the books. They get annoyed maybe, but not scared. He is terrified." Why I asked, though, I feared the answer. Because he knows I am going to find everything she said, turning back to her laptop. And he knows that once I see the numbers, his life is over. We sat in silence, watching the digital clock on the corner of her screen. 8 minutes. 7 minutes. I felt sick. Part of me wanted him to call her bluff to prove that he was innocent, that this was all a misunderstanding. But another part, the part of me that had been hungry and cold for months, wanted him to be scared. At the 6-minute mark, a notification chimed on Valerie's laptop. An email had arrived. Subject statements. She clicked it open. She downloaded the first file. She adjusted her glasses and leaned in her eyes, scanning the columns of numbers. I watched her face. I saw her eyebrows knit together. I saw her lips press into a thin white line. She let out a breath that was half sigh, half growl. "What is it?" I asked. "He is dumber than I thought," she muttered. "Martin, look at this." She turned the laptop toward me. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and columns of numbers. "This is an Excel file," she said, tapping the screen. He typed this up. "These are not official bank records. Look at the formatting. Look at the fonts. He made this himself to hide where the money is really going." She closed the laptop with a snap. "He thinks we are idiots," she said, standing up and smoothing her blazer. "He thinks he can throw a spreadsheet at me and I will go away." She pulled her phone out again. "Where are we going?" I asked. "We are going to the bank," she said. "We are going to walk into the branch and we are going to get the real statements. And then Martin, we are going to burn his little kingdom to the ground. But first, you need to eat." She opened her purse and handed me a protein bar. "Eat this," she commanded. "You will need your strength. Today is going to be a very long day." I took the bar. I looked at my sister standing in my squalid kitchen, like an avenging angel. For the first time in 2 years, I did not feel alone. I felt a flicker of something I thought had died along with my bank account. I felt hope. Valerie stared at the screen of her laptop with a look of absolute disgust. She did not even bother to print the file Ryan had sent. She simply pointed a manicured finger at the glowing spreadsheet. "This is an insult," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "He thinks he can send me a typed-up list of numbers, and I will just nod and go away. Look at this, Martin. No bank logos, no transaction codes, just rows of round, perfect numbers. He claims your portfolio is sitting at $1.2 million. She slammed the laptop shut. "We are not playing his game anymore. We are going straight to the source." She reached for my phone and dialed the number on the back of my useless debit card. It was the direct line for Chase Private Client. I used to have a personal banker, a nice woman named Sarah, but I had not spoken to her in 2 years because Ryan told me she had moved branches. The automated system answered. Valerie navigated the menus with the speed of a concert pianist. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Chase Private Client, this is Jonathan. How may I assist you today? I need to access the accounts for Martin Vance." Valerie said, her voice crisp. "I am sitting with the account holder right now. I will put him on." She shoved the phone into my hand. My palms were sweating so much I almost dropped it. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. "This is Martin Vance." "Hello, Mr. Vance," Jonathan said. "For security purposes, I need to verify your identity. Can you please state your full social security number?" I gave it to him. "Thank you. Now I need the answer to your security question. What was the name of your mother's first pet?" I froze. My mother hated animals. She never had a pet. I do not think she had one," I stammered. "I am sorry, sir, that is the question on file." I looked at Valerie, panic rising in my throat. "Ryan changed it," I whispered. "Try Megan's dog," Valerie hissed. "Or Ryan's hamster from when he was 10. "Try Buster," I said. "Incorrect. Try Snickers." "Incorrect. Sir, you have one more attempt before the account is locked for 24 hours. I felt like I was drowning. My own life, my own history, was locked behind a wall I could not climb. Ryan had not just taken my money. He had rewritten my identity to keep me out. Valerie grabbed the phone from my hand. "Listen to me, Jonathan," she said, her voice dropping into that tone that made grown men flinch. "My name is Valerie Vance. I am a former chief public accountant, and I am currently recording this call. We are suspecting identity theft and elder financial abuse. The reason, Mr. Vance cannot answer the security question is because his power of attorney, who is the suspect in this fraud, changed the answers to lock him out. Now you are going to verify him a different way. You are going to use the out-of-wallet questions. Ask him about his previous addresses. Ask him about his late wife's date of birth. Ask him the make and model of the first car he financed. Do it now, or I will have a subpoena on your desk by noon. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Jonathan typing furiously. "One moment, please," he said, his voice tight. The next 30 minutes were a blur of tension. They transferred us to a supervisor, then to the fraud department. I had to answer questions about a mortgage I paid off in 1995. I had to remember the street number of the house I grew up in. I had to verify the exact date of Diane's passing. It was grueling. It felt like an interrogation. I was sweating through my thin shirt, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Finally, the voice on the line changed. "Thank you, Mr. Vance. You have been verified. We have reset your access. What information were you looking for today?" Valerie put the phone on speaker and set it gently on the table between us. She took a pen and a notepad from her purse. "We need the current balance of the primary retirement investment account," she said. "The one that was valued at $800,000 2 years ago." I held my breath. I remembered that number. 800,000. It was the nest egg Diane and I had built over 40 years. It was our safety. It was our freedom. I heard the clicking of keys. The current balance on the investment account is $2,142.16. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling off the chair. "Say that again," Valerie said, her voice void of any emotion. $2,142. It was gone. All of it. 40 years of early mornings and late nights. 40 years of saving. Gone. And the checking account, Valerie asked, writing the number down on her pad. The pen dug deep into the paper. $150 even. I felt a physical blow to my stomach. I wanted to vomit. That was why the card was declined. That was why I had no medicine. "Okay," Valerie said. "Now I need you to read the transaction history for the last 12 months. Where did the money go? We are looking for large recurring transfers." "One moment. Okay, I see a recurring monthly transfer set up 18 months ago. Go on." $50,000 on the first of every month, wired to an external business account. "What is the name of the business?" Valerie asked. M&R Investments, LLC. "And are there any others?" "Yes, ma'am. There is a secondary transfer on the 15th of every month. $25,000. To whom? It is labeled as consulting fees. The recipient is listed as Megan Vance." The silence in my kitchen was heavier than the grave. I stared at the peeling paint on the wall, unable to look at my sister. "Megan Vance," Valerie repeated. "Consulting fees?" "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you. Please freeze all these accounts immediately. No money goes in or out without Martin Vance's voice authorization. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "It is done." Valerie hung up the phone. She sat back in her chair and looked at the notepad. She did not say anything for a long time. She just stared at the numbers she had written. 50,000 a month to M&R. 25,000 a month to Megan. I felt my legs give out. I slid off the chair and onto the dirty linoleum floor. I pulled my knees to my chest. I felt cold, so incredibly cold. M&R, I whispered. Valerie looked down at me. Her face was grim. "Megan and Ryan," she said. It was so simple, so arrogant. They had not even tried to hide it. They had named their shell company after themselves. They had slapped their initials on the instrument of my destruction like a monogram on a towel. He stole it, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. He stole everything. The house money, the retirement, the stocks. He did not just steal it, Martin Valerie said, kneeling beside me. He funneled it. He set up a salary for his wife using your life savings. $25,000 a month for consulting. What does Megan consult on? Shopping. She reached out and took my hand. He gutted you, Martin. He looked you in the eye, told you he was protecting you, and he gutted you like a fish. I closed my eyes. I saw Ryan as a baby sleeping in my arms. I saw him graduating from college, smiling in his gown. I saw him at his wedding raising a glass to me and Diane. I gave him everything. I sobbed. I paid for his school. I bought him his first car. I helped him with the down payment on his first house. I loved him. I loved him more than my own life. And he repaid you by leaving you to die in the dark, Valerie said. She was not trying to comfort me. She was trying to harden me. She was pouring concrete into my spine. Look at me, Martin. I opened my eyes. You are not a father anymore. Not to him. You are a victim of a crime. You have been mugged. The man who did this is not your son. He is a predator, and M&R Investments is the weapon he used. She stood up and offered me her hand. Get up. We are not done. We have the numbers now. We know where the money went. Now we need to find out what they bought with it. Because you do not just lose $1.5 million. You wear it. You drive it. You live in it. I took her hand and pulled myself up. My legs were shaking, but I stood. The shock was beginning to fade, replaced by a dull, aching clarity. M&R, I repeated. Megan and Ryan. I had raised a viper. I had warmed him in my bosom, protected him, nurtured him. And the moment I was weak, the moment Diane was gone and I was vulnerable, he had bitten me. Valerie picked up the notepad and tore the sheet off. We have the evidence, she said. Now we build the coffin. Get your coat, Martin. We have a lawyer to see. I looked at the empty refrigerator one last time. I looked at the red disconnection notice. I looked at the poverty that my son had forced me into while he paid his wife $25,000 a month to consult on how to spend my money. I grabbed my coat. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain this time. It was the slow, hot burn of hatred. Let us go, I said. Valerie did not take me back to my apartment. She said that place was a crime scene and I was the victim, and victims do not sleep at the scene of the crime. Instead, she drove us to a residence inn in downtown Phoenix. It was not a palace, but compared to the hovel I had been living in, it felt like the Ritz-Carlton. It had clean sheets that smelled of lavender and a kitchenette with a working refrigerator, and most importantly, it had a heater that worked. The first thing Valerie did was drive me to a pharmacy. She did not ask about the cost. She simply handed her credit card to the pharmacist and paid the $280 for my blood thinners. She bought me vitamins. She bought me protein shakes. She bought me a new toothbrush. When I took that first pill, when I felt the medicine that kept my heart beating slide down my throat, I felt a wave of relief so profound I almost collapsed right there in the aisle. It was the taste of survival. Then she took me to a department store. She looked at my clothes, the threadbare cardigan, the trousers that were 3 sizes too big, because I had been starving, and she shook her head. We are going to war. Martin, she said, and soldiers need a uniform. She bought me a dark blue suit. She bought me crisp white shirts. She bought me polished black shoes. When I looked in the dressing room mirror, I did not see the broken old man who had begged for soup money. I saw Martin Vance, the senior engineer. I saw the man I used to be. I straightened my tie and I felt something click into place inside my chest. The shame was evaporating. It was being replaced by a cold, hard resolve. We turned the hotel suite into a war room. Valerie set up her laptop on the dining table. She arranged notepads and pens in neat rows. She called room service and ordered enough food to feed an army. And then she made a phone call. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. A woman walked in who looked like she could cut glass with her jawline. She was in her 50s, wearing a power suit that cost more than my car. She carried a leather briefcase and had eyes that missed nothing. Valerie introduced her as Ms. Shaw, a forensic attorney who specialized in high-stakes financial fraud. She was not the kind of lawyer you hired to write a will. She was the kind of lawyer you hired to destroy someone. Ms. Shaw did not waste time with pleasantries. She sat down, opened her briefcase, and pulled out a laptop. Valerie had already briefed her on the phone. Ms. Shaw looked at me and said, "Mr. Vance, I am going to run a full credit check on your Social Security number. We need to see how deep this rot goes." She typed for a few minutes. The room was silent except for the clicking of her keys and the hum of the air conditioner. I sat there in my new suit, feeling like a defendant waiting for a verdict. Suddenly, Ms. Shaw stopped typing. She leaned back in her chair and took off her glasses. She looked at me with an expression that was part pity and part professional fury. "Mr. Vance," she said, "do you own an American Express Centurion card?" I frowned. I did not even know what that was. "No," I said. "I have a debit card. The blue one." Ms. Shaw turned the laptop around so I could see the screen. "No, Mr. Vance," she said. "You have 3 American Express Centurion cards. They are commonly known as black cards. They are invitation only. They are reserved for the ultra-wealthy. And according to this credit report, they were opened in your name 18 months ago." I stared at the screen. Active, active, active. 3 black cards, limits virtually non-existent. Valerie stood up and walked behind me, looking over my shoulder. "Pull the statements," she ordered. "I want to see the charges." Ms. Shaw navigated through the digital records. She downloaded the transaction history for the last year. The printer in the corner of the room whirred to life. It began to spit out pages. 1 page, 2 pages, 10 pages, 50 pages. It kept printing. The sound was rhythmic and sickening, like a heartbeat counting down to a disaster. Valerie picked up the stack of warm paper. She handed half of it to me. "Read it, Martin," she said. "Read what your son has been doing while you were sitting in the dark." I looked at the first page. My eyes widened. Chanel Scottsdale. $12,000. I remembered the bag. The black quilted bag Megan was swinging over her shoulder yesterday when she told me to go home. She had been standing in her driveway wearing $12,000 of my money while I begged for food. I looked at the next line. Emirates Airlines, first class, 2 tickets, $20,000. The date was 6 months ago. I remembered that week. I had called Ryan because my water heater had broken. He told me he was in Dubai for a business conference. He said it was very stressful. He said he was working hard for the family. He and Megan had flown first class to Dubai on my credit card. They had stayed at the Burj Al Arab. I saw the charge. $5,000 a night. While I boiled water on the stove to wash my face, they were sleeping in a palace in the desert. I turned the page. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Not anymore. Aspen Ski Resort, $8,000. Michelin star restaurant in Napa Valley, $3,000 for 1 dinner. Tiffany & Company, $15,000. It went on and on, page after page of excess, page after page of gluttony. They were not just living off my money, they were feasting on it. They were living like royalty, like celebrities, and they were doing it all in my name. And then I saw it. It was a recurring charge. It appeared on the statement on the 1st of every month like clockwork. Maserati Financial Services. Lease payment. $2,200. The room seemed to tilt. I closed my eyes and I was back in the driveway in Scottsdale. I saw the white car gleaming under the porch lights. The car that looked like a shark. The car that blocked my rusted Ford Taurus. Ryan had walked past it without even glancing at it. It was just a toy to him. I opened my eyes and looked at Valerie. The car, I whispered. The white Maserati in his driveway. Valerie nodded slowly. Her face was grim. You are paying for it, Martin. You are leasing a supercar for your son while you drive a wreck that might explode at any moment. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights of Phoenix. I felt a change taking place inside my body. For months, I had been filled with sadness. I had been filled with grief for Diane and fear for my own survival. I had felt weak. I had felt like a victim. But as I looked at those lights, I felt the sadness evaporate. It was burned away by a heat that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. It was rage. But it was not the hot, chaotic rage of a temper tantrum. It was the cold, calculating rage of an engineer who has found a flaw in the system and intends to fix it. I turned back to the room. Miss Shaw and Valerie were watching me. He bought a watch, I said, pointing at a line on the paper. A Rolex Daytona, $25,000. I saw it on his wrist. He told me it was a replica. He told me he bought it on Canal Street in New York for $50. He laughed about it. He laughed at me, Valerie said. He laughs at you every day, Martin. He thinks you are a joke. He thinks you are a resource to be mined until you are empty and then discarded. I walked back to the table. I picked up the stack of statements. $250,000 in 18 months, plus the cash transfers, plus the mortgage. He is not my son, I said. My voice was steady. It sounded different to my own ears. It sounded deeper, stronger. The man who did this is a stranger. He is a thief who looks like my son. Miss Shaw looked at me with respect. So what do you want to do, Mr. Vance? I looked at the statements one last time. I looked at the charge for the Chanel bag. I looked at the charge for the Maserati. I looked at the charge for the dinner in Napa. I want to destroy him, I said. I do not just want my money back. I want to take everything. I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to stand in the dark and wonder if he is going to survive the night. I want to strip him of every single thing he bought with my name. Valerie smiled. It was a small, tight smile, but it was the first time she had looked pleased since she arrived. Good, she said. Then let us get to work. We have the evidence. Now we need the confession. Ms. Shaw pulled out a fresh legal pad. We can sue him, she said. We can file civil charges. But he has the power of attorney. He will argue that you authorized these expenses. He will argue that you wanted him to have the car and the trips. He will say you are generous, or he will say you are senile and you forgot. It will be your word against his legal documents. It could take years in court. I do not have years, I said. Exactly, Valerie said. That is why we are not going to court yet. We are going to set a trap. We are going to make him admit it. We are going to make him say it out loud in front of witnesses. How, I asked. Valerie leaned forward. Her eyes were shining with a dangerous light. You are going to throw a party, Martin. A celebration. You are going to invite him over. You are going to play the part of the grateful, senile father one last time. You are going to feed his ego until it bursts. And when he feels safe, when he feels untouchable, we are going to cut his legs out from under him. I looked at my sister. I looked at the lawyer. I looked at the black suit I was wearing. I am ready, I said. Tell me what to do. The room felt different now. It was no longer a hotel suite. It was a command center. And I was no longer a retired engineer waiting to die. I was a hunter. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where my prey was. Ms. Shaw's phone buzzed on the mahogany table, cutting through the silence of the room like a physical blow. It was a sharp, intrusive sound that made us all jump. She looked at the caller ID and held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "It is the private investigator," she said. She pressed the speaker button, and the voice of a man filled the hotel suite. It was a dry, clinical voice, the voice of someone who delivered bad news for a living. "Ms. Shaw, I have completed the title search on the primary residence at 42 Oakwood Drive." I leaned forward. That was my house. That was the house I had bought with Diane in 1982. We had paid off the mortgage 20 years ago. It was supposed to be the one thing that was safe, the one asset that was untouchable. "Go ahead," Ms. Shaw said, her eyes fixed on my face. "There seems to be a discrepancy in the ownership status," the investigator said. "Mr. Vance stated that the property was free and clear of all liens. However, the county recorder showing a significant encumbrance filed 6 months ago." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "What kind of encumbrance?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I did not sign anything. I have not signed a mortgage document in decades." The investigator paused. "The document is a home equity conversion mortgage, commonly known as a reverse mortgage. It was executed on May 15th of this year. The borrower on record is Martin Vance, represented by his attorney, in fact, Ryan Vance." The room seemed to tilt. A reverse mortgage. I knew what that was. It was a loan for people who were house rich and cash poor. You traded the equity in your home for cash, and the bank took ownership when you died or moved out. How much I whispered, though, I think I already knew the answer was going to destroy me. "The lump sum payout was $500,000, the investigator said. "The funds were wired to an account held by M&R Investments. $500,000. $500,000. He had stripped the equity right out of the walls. He had turned the bricks and mortar of my life into cash and funneled it into his shell company." Ms. Shaw thanked the investigator and ended the call. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Valerie reached out and touched my arm, but I pulled away. I stood up and walked to the corner of the room. I felt like I was going to be sick. "It was not the money. I want you to understand that. The $250,000 on the credit cards was money. The empty checking account was money. But this was different. This was violence." I closed my eyes and I was back there. I was standing in the foyer of 42 Oakwood Drive. I could smell the lemon polish Diane used on the banister. I could see the way the afternoon light hit the dust motes in the living room. I could hear the sound of Ryan running down the hallway as a toddler, his little feet thumping on the hardwood floors. That house was not an asset. It was a memory box. It was the physical container of my life with Diane. We had planted the rose bushes in the front yard together on a rainy Sunday in April. She had pricked her finger on a thorn, and I had kissed it better. We had marked Ryan's height on the doorframe of the pantry every birthday from age 3 to 18. Those pencil marks were still there. Faded and smudged, but they were there. Ryan knew that. He knew how much that house meant to me. He knew that I wanted to die in that house. He knew that I felt close to his mother when I sat in her favorite chair by the window. And he had sold it. He had taken the memories of his mother, the safe haven of his own childhood, and he had signed them away for $500,000. He had traded the pencil marks on the doorframe for a Maserati. He had traded the rose bushes for a trip to Dubai. He had traded his mother's ghost for a few months of luxury. The tears came then. They were hot and stinging. I sobbed. A deep guttural sound that seemed to come from the bottom of my soul. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, my face buried in my hands. I wept for Diane. I wept for the house that was no longer mine. I wept for the son I thought I had raised. Valerie sat on the floor next to me. She did not say anything. She did not tell me to be strong. She just put her arm around my shoulders and let me cry. She knew. She remembered that house, too. She remembered Christmas dinners and birthday parties. She knew what had been stolen. He sold her, I whispered through my tears. He sold Mom. He looked at that house and he did not see a home. He saw a pile of cash. He saw an ATM. It went on for minutes, this raw pouring out of grief. But as the tears dried, something else began to take their place. It was a cold, hard sensation in the center of my chest. It felt like a piece of iron cooling and hardening. I thought about Ryan standing in his kitchen telling me to go home. He had told me to go home to a house that he had already sold to the bank. He had looked me in the eye, knowing he had stripped the equity out from under my feet, and he had smiled. He was not just greedy, he was cruel. He had a hole inside him where his conscience should be. And I had been feeding that hole with my love and my money for 40 years. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my new suit jacket. I took a deep breath. The air in the hotel room felt thin and recycled, but it cleared my head. I looked at the floor. The pattern of the carpet was geometric and precise. It reminded me of the blueprints I used to draw. Lines, angles, trajectories. You cannot fix a broken system by crying about it. You have to dismantle it. You have to find the point of failure and remove it. Ryan was the point of failure. I stood up. My knees popped, but I felt steady. I looked at Valerie and Ms. Shaw. They were watching me with concern, waiting to see if I would break completely. "He thinks he won," I said. My voice was raspy, but it was steady. "He thinks because he has the paper and the signature that the house is gone. He thinks I am just going to fade away and let the bank take it when I die." I walked over to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there in the distance was my house. My house. Not the bank's house. Not Ryan's house. Mine. "I am going to get it back," I said. I turned to face them. "I do not care what it costs. I do not care what we have to do. That house is not going to be lost. I am going to redeem that mortgage, and I am going to make him pay for every single cent of it." Ms. Shaw nodded slowly, a look of professional respect in her eyes. "We can include the recovery of the real estate equity in the civil suit," she said. "If we can prove fraud, which we can petition the court to unwind the transaction or force the liquidation of his assets to pay off the lien. It will be a fight, Mr. Vance. The bank will not want to let go easily." "Let them fight," I said. "I spent 40 years fighting gravity to put metal in the sky. I can fight a bank, and I can certainly fight a thief." Valerie stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Good," she said. "Grief time is over. Now we get back to business. We have the numbers. We have the credit cards. We have the mortgage. We have enough evidence to put him away for 20 years. "Not yet," I said. "Not until I hear him say it." I looked at the phone on the table. The phone I had used to beg him for food. The phone he had ignored. "I want to look him in the eye," I said. "I want to stand in front of him and offer him a toast. I want to see the moment he realizes that the old man he threw away has come back to haunt him." The plan was already forming in my head. It was precise. It was calculated. It was ruthless. It was the kind of plan an engineer makes when the only option is to jettison the cargo to save the ship. Ryan was the cargo, and I was ready to cut him loose. "Let us plan the party," I said. "I want everything to be perfect. I want him to feel safe. I want him to feel like the king of the world. Because the fall is so much harder when you think you are flying." Valerie paced back and forth across the hotel room carpet, her heels sinking slightly into the plush fabric. She looked like a tiger in a cage calculating the distance to the bars. "We cannot just sue him," she said, stopping mid-stride to look at me. "Not yet. Why not? I asked, my voice still thick with the residue of tears. We have the bank statements. We have the credit card bills. We know he stole it. Because he has the power of attorney, she replied sharply. She picked up a legal pad and waved it in the air. This document is his shield, Martin. You signed it willingly. You gave him the legal authority to act on your behalf. If we go to court now, he will say he was acting in your best interest. He will say the Maserati was a company car for managing your estate. He will say the trip to Dubai was for international investment research. He will say you authorized the reverse mortgage to increase your liquidity. She threw the pad onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped near my hand. He will paint you as a senile, confused old man who forgot what he agreed to, she continued. And the judge might believe him. Ryan is charming. He is a financial professional. You are an old man living in a slum. Appearance matters in court, Martin. We need more than numbers. We need intent. We need him to say it. Say what I asked. We need him to admit that he is not managing your money. Valerie said, leaning over the table, her blue eyes locking onto mine. We need him to admit that he took it, that he considers it his. We need him to brag about it. Brag about it, I said, shaking my head. Why would he do that? He is a thief, not an idiot. Valerie smiled, a cold, thin smile that did not reach her eyes. Because he is a narcissist, Martin. And narcissists cannot resist an audience. They cannot resist praise. If you feed his ego, he will get full and he will get sloppy. She pulled out a chair and sat down opposite me. Here is the plan. We are going to throw a party, a celebration. A party, I repeated, incredulous. I want to strangle him, Valerie. I do not want to celebrate him. That is exactly why you have to do it, she said. You have to play the part, Martin. You have to be the loving, grateful, confused father one last time. We are going to tell him that next week is your 45th wedding anniversary with Diane. We are going to invite him and Megan to your apartment for a dinner. To my apartment, I asked. To that hole. Yes, she said. If we do it here at the hotel, he will be suspicious. He will wonder where you got the money. But if we do it at your apartment, he will feel superior. He will walk into that squalor wearing his Italian suit, and he will feel like a king visiting a peasant. That is what we want. We want him comfortable. We want him arrogant. She reached for my phone and slid it across the table toward me. Call him, she ordered. Tell him I left. Tell him I was making trouble and you sent me back to Denver. Tell him you are sorry you doubted him. I looked at the phone. It felt like a live grenade. I had to call the man who had robbed me blind and tell him I loved him. I had to apologize to the man who left me to die. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes and pictured the rose bushes he had sold. I pictured the empty medicine bottle. I let that anger settle in my gut, cold and heavy. It was not fuel for an explosion. It was fuel for a performance. I picked up the phone and dialed. Speaker, Valerie whispered. I pressed the button. The line rang. Once. Twice. Hello? It was Ryan. His voice was guarded tight. He was expecting a fight. He was expecting Valerie. Ryan, I said, my voice trembling. I made sure to let a little wheeze creep into my breath. It is Dad. Dad, Ryan said. Is Aunt Val there? I do not want to talk to her again. She was extremely rude to me this morning. She is gone, son, I said. I sent her home. There was a pause, a long silence while he processed this. You sent her home, he asked, his voice lightening. Why? She was upsetting me, Ryan, I said, forcing the words out through grit teeth. She does not understand how these things work. She was yelling about spreadsheets and bank accounts, and it was making my chest hurt. I told her to leave. I told her I trust my son. I heard him exhale a long breath of relief. It was the sound of a man who thinks he has dodged a bullet. I am glad you did that, Dad, he said, his tone shifting instantly back to that smooth, patronizing warmth. Aunt Val has always been dramatic. She just wants to cause trouble between us. I am doing everything I can to protect your future, and she just does not get it. I know, son, I said. I know, and I want to make it up to you. I want to apologize for this morning. You do not have to apologize, Dad, he said magnanimously. It was not your fault. You are getting older. It is easy to get confused when people are shouting numbers at you. Yes, I am getting older, I agreed, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. Listen, Ryan. Next Saturday would have been 45 years with your mother. I do not want to be alone. I want to have a family dinner. Just you and Megan. And me. At the apartment. At the apartment, he repeated, and I could hear the sneer in his voice even over the phone. Dad, surely we can go somewhere nicer. I can take you to a steakhouse. No, I said firmly. I want to be home. I want to feel close to your mother. Please, Ryan, let me buy you dinner. I have some cash left from what you gave me. I will order Mexican food. It will be a celebration. I want to thank you properly for everything you have done for managing the estate. He hesitated. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about the smell of my apartment. He was thinking about his expensive shoes on my dirty floor. But he was also thinking about his ego. He wanted to be thanked. He wanted to be acknowledged as the savior of the family. Okay, Dad, he said finally. We will be there. Saturday at 7. Thank you, son, I said. Thank you. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking so hard the phone rattled against the table. I felt dirty. I felt like I had just bathed in sewage. He bought it, Valerie said, her eyes gleaming. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. He thinks he won Martin. He thinks you are back under his control. He called me confused, I whispered. He said I am getting older. Good, Valerie said. Let him think that. Let him think you are weak. Because when we drop the hammer on him, he will never see it coming. She turned to Ms. Shaw, who had been listening silently in the corner. Is the paperwork ready? Valerie asked. Ms. Shaw nodded. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I have the revocation of power of attorney prepared, she said. It revokes all of Ryan's authority effective immediately upon signature. I also have a draft of a civil complaint for breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, and fraud. And most importantly, I have the emergency asset freeze order. She laid the documents out on the table. They looked like ordinary papers, but to me, they looked like weapons. We will have a notary on standby in the van outside the apartment on Saturday, Miss Shaw explained. Once he makes the admission, once we have it recorded, you sign these papers. We will file them electronically with the court first thing Monday morning. By the time he wakes up, his accounts will be frozen. His credit cards will be dead. He will be locked out of everything. And the house, I asked. What about my house? Ms. Shaw looked at me, her expression serious. The house is complicated. But if we can prove he obtained the reverse mortgage through fraud, which we can petition the court to void the transaction. It will be a battle, but we have the ammunition. Valerie stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. He is going to come to that dinner, she said softly. He is going to wear his expensive watch and his custom suit. He is going to bring that wife of his who spends $25,000 a month on consulting. And they are going to all your table and eat your food and think they are untouchable. She turned back to me. You have to be strong, Martin. You have to keep the mask on until the very last second. Can you do that? Can you look him in the eye and smile while you hold the knife? I thought about the cold nights. I thought about the hunger. I thought about the fear of dying alone because I couldn't afford a pill that cost less than his lunch. I looked at my sister, and I did not have to fake the steely resolve in my voice. I can do it, I said. I spent 40 years calculating the stress points of metal. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to break something. And I am going to break him. good, Valerie said. Then let us plan the menu. I want this to be a meal he remembers for the rest of his life. We spent the rest of the night going over the details. Every word I would say. Every cue I would give. We were not just planning a dinner party. We were planning an execution. And as I lay in the clean hotel bed that night staring at the ceiling, I realized I was not afraid anymore. I was not the victim. I was the architect of his downfall. And Saturday could not come fast enough. Saturday evening arrived with a heavy, humid heat that seemed to press against the thin walls of my apartment. Inside, the transformation was surreal. Valerie had hired a high-end catering service from El Chorro, one of the most expensive Mexican restaurants in the city. The smell of slow-roasted carnitas and fresh cilantro fought a losing battle against the permanent stench of mildew and old pipes that permeated the drywall. It was a bizarre tableau. We had set up a flimsy white plastic folding table in the center of the room, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $20. On top of it sat silver platters of food fit for a wedding gleaming under the harsh light of the single naked bulb hanging from the ceiling. I looked at Bill and Sandra sitting stiffly on the folding chairs. They were my neighbors from down the hall, good people who had shared their meager dinners with me when I was starving. I had told them this was a reconciliation dinner, a celebration of family unity. They did not know they were actually the jury in a kangaroo court I had set up for my son. They looked uncomfortable in their Sunday best, their eyes darting around the room, sensing the tension that vibrated in the air like a high-tension wire. Then came the knock. It was not a polite tap. It was a firm, authoritative rap, the sound of a landlord coming to collect rent. I smoothed the lapels of my new dark suit, took a deep breath that rattled slightly in my chest, and opened the door. Ryan and Megan stood there like royalty visiting a leper colony. The visual contrast was violent. Megan was wearing a slip dress made of champagne-colored silk that rippled like water. It was backless and entirely inappropriate for a dinner in a slum. She wore strappy heels that cost more than the furniture in the room. As the door swung open, the first thing she did was not smile or say hello. She wrinkled her nose. It was a small, instinctive twitch, a physical recoil from the smell of my life. Ryan stood beside her in a navy Italian suit, checking his Rolex, the $25,000 watch, paid for by my retirement. He looked at me, his eyes scanning my new suit with a flicker of confusion, but he quickly masked it with a wide plastic smile. "Dad," he said, stepping inside. He did not hug me. He reached out and clapped a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, patronizing pat that felt less like affection and more like ownership. "You look good. Better than last week." Before I could answer, Valerie emerged from the kitchen. She was unrecognizable. Gone was the sharp, steel-spined forensic accountant who had orchestrated this entire operation. In her place was a hunched, fluttery old woman wearing a shapeless, moth-eaten beige cardigan that smelled faintly of mothballs. Her hair was teased into a frizzy halo, and her glasses were perched crookedly on her nose. She looked harmless. She looked like exactly what Ryan wanted her to be, a confused, irrelevant relic. "Oh, look who is here," Valerie chirped, her voice pitching up into a trembling soprano. "It is the golden boy. Ryan, come in, come in. And Megan, you look like a movie star. Watch your step, dear, the floor is a little uneven there." Valerie moved with a frantic, nervous energy, grabbing a bottle of premium tequila she had bought. Not the cheap stuff. This was $200 a bottle. She poured liberal amounts into plastic cups because I did not have enough glass ones. "Here, here, you must be thirsty," she said, thrusting the cups into their hands. "A toast to family, to reconciliation." Ryan took the cup, looking at the plastic with amusement. He took a sip, his eyebrows raising at the quality of the liquor. "Thanks, Aunt Val," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I am glad you are feeling better. Dad said you were having a hard time understanding the portfolio strategy. It can be very complex." Valerie nodded vigorously, playing the part to perfection. "Oh, I know," she said, refilling his cup, before he had even finished the first ounce. I am just an old bean counter from the dinosaur age. These new markets, the derivatives, the trusts, it is all Greek to me. Martin is so lucky to have you, Ryan. I was telling Bill and Sandra here just how smart you are. Most children would just put their parents in a home, but you are managing millions. It is a heavy burden. I watched Ryan physically inflate. The flattery hit him like a drug. He loosened his tie. He leaned back against the counter, surveying the room, not with disgust anymore, but with the benevolent gaze of a lord surveying his serfs. He took a large swallow of tequila. It is a burden, Aunt Val, he admitted, his voice lowering into a confidential baritone. People do not realize the stress. The market volatility lately has been insane. I spend hours every day just moving assets around to shield Dad from tax liabilities. It is a full-time job. Megan stood by his side, sipping her drink, scrolling through her phone with her free hand. She looked bored, detached, as if she were waiting for a taxi to take her away from a bad party. She barely acknowledged Bill and Sandra, who sat quietly holding their plates of tacos, watching the performance with wide eyes. Sit, please everyone eat, Valerie urged, her hands fluttering. She piled food onto paper plates and handed them to Ryan and Megan. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed because there were not enough chairs. He balanced the plate on his knee, looking ridiculous in his $2,000 suit, but he was too drunk on praise and tequila to notice. I sat in my usual chair, the wobbly one. I kept my hands folded in my lap to hide the fact that I was making fists so tight my fingernails were digging into my palms. I watched my son eat the food I had paid for, drink the liquor I had paid for, wearing the watch I had paid for. I watched him smile at the neighbors he would never deign to speak to in real life. The anger inside me was a cold, solid thing now. It was no longer a fire. It was a block of ice. Valerie hovered over them, the perfect hostess, the perfect fool. You know, Ryan, she said, pouring more tequila into his half-empty cup, I was looking at Martin's old papers from Lockheed the other day. He worked so hard for that pension. It is such a relief to know it is growing under your care. I bet you have doubled it by now, haven't you? With your skills. Ryan laughed, a loud booming sound that bounced off the thin walls. Doubled, he scoffed, taking a long drink. Aunt Val, in this economy, preserving capital is a victory. But yes, we have seen significant gains. Significant. We are positioning Dad for a legacy that will last generations. Legacy. The word hung in the air, thick with irony. His idea of a legacy was a leased Maserati and a closet full of handbags. My legacy was currently sitting in a room that violated 3 different health codes. The alcohol was hitting him fast. He was not used to drinking on an empty stomach, and he had already downed 3 shots worth of tequila in 20 minutes. His cheeks were flushing. His gestures were becoming expansive. He was feeling safe. He was surrounded by old people and poor people, the 2 demographics he felt most superior to. He felt untouchable. Megan finished her drink and held out her cup for a refill without even looking at Valerie. Valerie poured it immediately, her face a mask of servile adoration. You 2 are just such a power couple, Valerie cooed. Look at you. The clothes, the car outside Martin told me about the Maserati. It must cost a fortune to maintain a fleet like that while managing the estate. Ryan waved his hand dismissively. It is necessary, he said, his words slurring just the tiniest bit. In my world, image is everything. You have to look successful to be successful. Clients trust success. I do it for the family. It is all part of the strategy. I looked at Bill and Sandra. They were exchanging glances. They were simple people, but they were not stupid. They saw the contrast. They saw the son in the suit and the father in the rags. They saw the lie sitting right there on the edge of the mattress. Valerie moved to the center of the room. She was holding her own glass now. It was time. The trap was set. The prey was fat and happy and drunk. I caught Valerie's eye. Behind the thick, crooked glasses, her blue eyes were razor sharp. She gave me a microscopic nod. It was the signal. The play was over. The execution was about to begin. Valerie tapped her plastic fork against the side of her cup again. The sound was sharp, like a gavel striking a block, cutting through the murmur of conversation in the humid room. She stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the table as if her legs were too weak to support her. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on the water stains on the ceiling, the peeling paint near the window, and finally resting on Ryan, who was now flushed and sweating slightly from the tequila. "I have one more toast," Valerie announced, her voice trembling with what sounded like emotion, but what I knew was cold calculation. "To Martin. My big brother. A man who designed the navigation systems for fighter jets. A man who worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years. She turned to face me, and for a split second the mask slipped, and I saw the fierce protectiveness in her eyes before the confused old woman returned. But I have to admit she continued turning back to Ryan, her brow furrowing in a pantomime of befuddlement. "I am just so confused, Ryan. You say the portfolio is growing. You say you are preserving his legacy. But look at this place." She swept her hand around the room, gesturing to the squalor. "Martin's pension is $15,000 a month. That is more money than most families see in 3 months. So why is my brother living like a refugee? Why did I find an eviction notice in his trash? Why is he eating expired yogurt? If you are managing the money so well, why is he living in hell?" The air in the room changed instantly. The jovial, drunken atmosphere evaporated. Bill and Sandra, who had been quietly eating their tacos, stopped chewing. They looked from Valerie to Ryan, sensing the shift. Ryan stiffened. The smile slid off his face like oil. He set his cup down on the mattress, splashing a little tequila on the sheets. He stood up, swaying slightly. The alcohol had loosened his tongue, but it had also shortened his fuse. He felt attacked. He felt his authority being questioned in front of his audience. "It is complicated, Aunt Val," he snapped, his voice losing its smooth veneer. "I told you, cash flow is tight. Dad spends money on frivolous things. You do not see the bills I have to pay. He is high maintenance." I looked up at him from my wobbly chair. The injustice of it burned in my throat. "I only buy medicine, Ryan," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "Medicine and food. That is all. I have not bought a new shirt in 5 years. Ryan whirled on me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of guilt and drunken rage. "You do not understand the markets, Dad. You do not understand liquidity. I am building something for this family. I am making sure we have a future." "But what about Martin's present?" Valerie pressed, her voice sharpening just a fraction. "What about his dignity? Where is the money, Ryan? It cannot just vanish." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, messing up his perfect styling. He looked trapped. He looked at Megan, but she was just staring at her phone, ignoring him, ignoring the disaster unfolding around her. He wanted her validation. He wanted someone to tell him he was right, that he was the smart one, the provider. He turned back to Valerie, his chest heaving. The narcissism was bubbling up, boiling over the edge of his self-control. He could not stand to be seen as incompetent. He could not stand to be seen as a failure. He had to be the hero, even if he was the villain. It did not vanish, he shouted, his voice echoing off the thin walls. "It is right where it belongs. It is an investment in the brand, in the image. In us. In you," Valerie corrected softly. "Yes, in us." Ryan gestured wildly between himself and Megan. "We are the legacy. We are the ones who have to carry the name forward. Dad had his time. Now it is our time. And you want to know where the money is. You really want to know." He looked around the room, his eyes wild, daring anyone to challenge him. He wanted to shock us. He wanted to crush us with his superiority. "My father's money is the family's legacy," he bellowed, pointing a finger at my chest. And as the manager, I decided where it was needed most. I decided who deserved it. He grabbed Megan's hand and pulled her up from the chair. She looked annoyed, almost stumbling in her heels. And I gave all the money from my father to my wife. He screamed the words hanging in the humid air like a guillotine blade. I gave it to her because she knows how to use it. She knows how to live. Dad just hoards it. We circulate it. We live. That is what money is for. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical weight. Bill dropped his fork. It clattered loudly onto his paper plate. Sandra covered her mouth with her hand. Even Megan looked up, her eyes wide, realizing that her husband had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had said the quiet part out loud. He had admitted to the theft in front of 4 witnesses. Ryan stood there panting, a defiant smirk plastered on his face. He thought he had won the argument. He thought he had silenced the critics with his bold declaration of power. I meant, he added, trying to soften the blow, but failing miserably, I gave it to her to manage the household expenses. Megan is excellent with budgeting. Valerie let out a sound. It was a laugh, but it was devoid of any humor. It was a cold, sharp bark that sent a shiver down my spine. Excellent with budgeting, Valerie repeated. And then the transformation happened. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon, but in reverse. It was terrifying. Valerie stood up straight. The hunch in her back vanished. She reached up and pulled the crooked glasses off her face, tossing them onto the table with a clatter. She reached for the top button of the beige, moth-eaten cardigan. With a quick, violent motion, she ripped it open and shrugged it off her shoulders, letting it fall to the dirty floor like a discarded skin. Underneath, she was wearing a sharp navy blue power suit. It was tailored to perfection, screaming authority and competence. She smoothed the lapels, her posture radiating a dangerous energy. She was no longer the confused aunt. She was the forensic accountant who had sent CFOs to federal prison. "Oh, she is excellent, is she?" Valerie said, her voice dropping into a register of pure, icy command. "She is so excellent that she managed to spend $250,000 on 3 American Express Centurion cards in 18 months. She reached into the large tote bag she had brought and pulled out a thick stack of papers. She slammed them onto the flimsy plastic table. The force of it made the salsa bowls jump. Megan's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks so fast, it looked like she had seen a ghost. She stared at the papers, recognizing the black American Express logo on the cover page. How did you get those?" Megan whispered, her voice barely audible. Valerie ignored her. She picked up the top sheet and held it up like an indictment. $12,000 at Chanel, Valerie read, her voice ringing with authority. $8,000 at Louis Vuitton. $20,000 for a first-class trip to Dubai. Is that budgeting, Megan? Is that how you manage the household expenses? Ryan took a step back, stumbling slightly. His arrogance was cracking, replaced by a dawning horror. You cannot see those," he stammered. "Those are private. I have power of attorney." Valerie threw the paper at him. It fluttered through the air and hit him in the chest. Or maybe Valerie continued, turning her gaze back to Megan like a laser beam. "You are so good at budgeting that you advised your husband to take out a reverse mortgage on his father's paid-off home. A home that held 40 years of memories. You advised him to strip $500,000 of equity out of it so you could lease a Maserati." She picked up another document. This one was a copy of the mortgage deed. She threw it onto the table in front of Megan. "Did you enjoy driving that car?" Megan Valerie asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Did you enjoy the leather seats? Did they feel good against your skin while your father-in-law was sleeping on a mattress on the floor because he sold his bed for food?" Megan was trembling now. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a crack. "Ryan," she gasped, clutching his arm. "Ryan, do something. She knows. She knows everything." Ryan looked from the papers to Valerie and then to me. His eyes were wide, frantic. He looked like an animal caught in a trap, realizing too late that the bait was poison. "Aunt Val, you are confused," he tried, but his voice was thin and weak. "These are investments. M&R Investments. It is a legitimate holding company." Valerie laughed again. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "M&R Investments," she said. "Megan and Ryan. You did not even try to hide it. You named your shell company after yourselves. That is not investing, Ryan. That is embezzlement. And I am a CPA, you idiot. Did you really think I would not trace the wire transfers? Did you think a spreadsheet you typed up in 10 minutes would fool me?" She hit play on her phone. Ryan's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "I gave all the money from my father to my wife." Valerie held the phone up. "I have it all, Ryan," she said. "The bank statements, the credit card bills, the mortgage fraud. And now your confession, recorded, witnessed." She pointed to Bill and Sandra, who were staring at Ryan with open disgust. "Say hello to the jury," Valerie said. Ryan looked at the neighbors. He looked at the papers. He looked at me. And for the first time in his life, he looked small. The expensive suit seemed to hang off him. The Rolex seemed heavy on his wrist. The illusion of the successful golden boy had shattered, leaving only a thief standing in a dirty apartment. Megan made a sound like a wounded animal. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into the folding chair, burying her face in her hands. "My shopping," she sobbed into her palms. "My reputation. Everyone is going to know." Valerie leaned over the table, getting right in her face. "Oh, honey," Valerie whispered. "Your reputation is the least of your problems. You should be worrying about your freedom. Because grand larceny is not a good look on anyone, no matter how much Chanel you wear." The room was silent, except for Megan's sobbing and the heavy, ragged breathing of my son. He stood there, swaying, looking at the ruins of his life while I sat in my chair, straightening my new tie, feeling the cold, hard weight of justice settling on my shoulders. The trap had sprung, and it had caught them perfectly. The atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to violence in the span of a heartbeat. Ryan stared at the pile of incriminating documents on the plastic table, his eyes darting back and forth like a cornered rat, looking for an escape route. He saw the credit card statements. He saw the mortgage deed. He saw the tangible proof of his crimes laid out under the harsh light of the naked bulb. Panic overtook his arrogance. The alcohol that had made him feel invincible moments ago now fueled a reckless, desperate aggression. "Give me those," he snarled, his face twisting into a mask of pure ugliness. He lunged forward. He threw himself across the flimsy table, his hands clawing for the stack of papers. He intended to tear them up. He intended to destroy the evidence, thinking that if he shredded the paper, the truth would disappear with it. He thought he could bully us one last time. He thought he could use his physical size to intimidate an old woman and a frail old man. But he never reached the papers. Before his fingers could graze the documents, the door to my apartment flew open with a force that rattled the frame. A man stepped inside. He was not a neighbor. He was not a friend. He was a mountain of a man wearing a black suit that strained against his shoulders. He was the private security detail Ms. Shaw had hired to stand guard in the hallway, unseen and silent, waiting for this exact moment. Ryan collided with the man like a bird hitting a windshield. The bodyguard did not even flinch. He simply raised one large hand and placed it squarely on Ryan's chest, stopping his momentum dead. It was effortless. It was humiliating. Ryan bounced back, stumbling over his own expensive shoes, and fell hard onto the dirty floor. He scrambled backward, looking up at the wall of muscle that now blocked his path to the table. "Do not touch the evidence, sir," the bodyguard said. His voice was deep and devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a professional who dealt with unruly children for a living. "Please take a seat." Ryan gasped for air, clutching his chest where the guard had pushed him. He looked at the man, then at Valerie, and finally at me. The fear in his eyes was absolute. He realized then that this was not a family squabble. This was a tactical operation, and he was completely outmatched. I stood up from my wobbly chair. For months, I had needed to use the armrests to push myself up. I had needed to wait for my knees to stop shaking. But tonight, I stood up in one fluid motion. The adrenaline coursing through my veins had burned away the weakness. I felt tall. I felt strong. I buttoned my new suit jacket with calm, deliberate fingers. I walked around the table. My steps were slow and measured. The sound of my polished shoes on the linoleum was the only sound in the room. I walked past Megan, who was still weeping into her hands. I walked past the bodyguard, who nodded respectfully and stepped aside to let me pass. I stopped in front of the table where Valerie had laid out the final document. It was a single sheet of paper, crisp and white, against the stained plastic table. At the top, in bold black letters, it read, "Revocation of power of attorney." Beside it lay a heavy, expensive fountain pen that Valerie had placed there. It was my old pen, the one I had used to sign off on engineering blueprints at Lockheed Martin for 30 years. She had saved it from the pawn shop pile. I looked down at Ryan. He was still on the floor, looking up at me. He looked pathetic. The Italian suit was dusty. His tie was crooked. The smell of expensive tequila oozed from his pores. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Dad, please. Do not do this. You are confused. Aunt Val has brainwashed you. You need me. Who is going to pay the bills? Who is going to manage the trusts? You cannot handle this alone." I looked him in the eye. I really looked at him. I searched for the little boy I used to take to baseball games. I searched for the young man I was so proud of at graduation. But they were gone, consumed by greed, replaced by this stranger who would sell his father's life for a car. "I am not confused, Ryan," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room. It was the voice I used when I led teams of engineers through critical launch sequences. It was a voice of absolute command. I am not senile. I continued leaning over the table so he could see the clarity in my eyes. I am a rocket scientist. I calculate trajectories for a living. I see patterns that other people miss. And I see you, Ryan. I see you clearly for the first time in years. I reached out and picked up the pen. It felt cool and familiar in my hand. It felt like a weapon. "I trusted you," I said, the words heavy with the weight of my broken heart. "I trusted you with my life. I trusted you with your mother's memory. I gave you the keys to the kingdom because I thought you were a king." Ryan reached a hand out toward me, a desperate, pleading gesture. "Dad, I love you." "I did it for us." "No," I cut him off. "You did it for you. And you thought because I loved you, I was blind. You thought because I was old, I was stupid." I placed the tip of the pen on the signature line. "But trust is a fragile thing, son," I said. "It is like glass. Once you shatter it, you cannot glue it back together. And you pulverized it. That trust is dead. It died the night I called you begging for medicine, and you let it go to voicemail." I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name. Martin Vance. I signed it with a flourish, a strong, bold signature that did not waver. It was the signature of a man taking back his life. It was the signature of a man closing a door forever. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was loud in the silence. It sounded like a zipper closing on a body bag. I capped the pen and set it down. It was done. Ryan let out a sob. It was a sound of pure despair. He knew what that signature meant. It meant the money tap was turned off. It meant the power was gone. It meant he was no longer the master of the universe. He was just an unemployed thief with a lot of debt. Valerie stepped forward. She held up her phone. The screen was glowing. "It is done," she announced, her voice ringing with triumph. "I just sent the audio file to Ms. Shaw. Every word you said tonight, Ryan. The admission about giving the money to your wife. The bragging. The confession. It is all recorded. It is all backed up on 3 different cloud servers." She tapped the screen again. "And I just sent a text to the legal team. They are filing the emergency motions electronically right now. By 8:00 tomorrow morning, every single asset associated with your names will be frozen. Your bank accounts, your investment portfolios, even that ridiculous account in the Cayman Islands. We found it, Ryan. We found everything." Megan lifted her head from her hands. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. "Frozen," she gasped. But I have a hair appointment tomorrow. I have bills. The lease on the car." "The car is gone, honey," Valerie said, looking at her with cold pity. "Martin paid the lease. Martin just canceled the payments. The repo man will be here for the Maserati before lunch. And as for your hair appointment, I suggest you learn to do it yourself. You are going to need to save money for a very good criminal defense lawyer." Ryan scrambled to his feet. He looked wild. He looked dangerous. But the bodyguard took a step forward, cracking his knuckles, and Ryan shrank back. He looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes now. There was only hatred. The pure, distilled hatred of a parasite that has been ripped away from its host. "You old fool," he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. "You think you won. You think you are smart. You are just a sad, lonely old man. You will die alone in this dump." I looked around the apartment. It was a dump, he was right about that. But it was my dump. And for the first time in 2 years, I was not afraid of dying in it. "No, son," I said quietly. "I will not die alone. Because I have family. Real family." I looked at Valerie. She was standing there in her sharp suit, holding the phone like a shield, looking at me with fierce pride. I looked at Bill and Sandra, who were nodding in solidarity. "And as for this place," I added, "I am leaving. I am going to buy back my house. My real house. And you are welcome to stay here. I paid the rent until the end of the month. It is the last thing I will ever pay for you." I turned my back on him. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and yet it was the easiest. I walked to the door, the bodyguard opening it for me. I stepped out into the hallway, leaving my son and his wife in the squalor they had created for me. As the door closed behind me, cutting off Ryan's screaming, I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway smelled of stale cooking and old carpet, but to me it smelled like freedom. I adjusted my cuffs, I straightened my spine, and I walked away, not as a victim, but as a man who had just survived a war. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but the wheels of financial ruin turn very fast. It has been 6 months since that dinner party in my cramped apartment, and the silence that followed was not empty, but filled with the sounds of a life being dismantled. Monday morning arrived like a sledgehammer for Ryan and Megan. Miss Shaw was true to her word. By the time they woke up, the freeze orders were active. I was told that Megan tried to buy a latte at Starbucks, and her card was declined. It was a petty victory, but I savored it. It was the first crack in their delusion. The legal process was brutal and efficient. We gave them a choice. They could face criminal charges for elder abuse, wire fraud, and grand larceny, which carried a mandatory prison sentence of 10 to 15 years. Or they could agree to a strict civil restitution plan. They chose the latter. They chose freedom, but the price was everything they owned. The Scottsdale mansion was sold at a fire sale price to pay off the reverse mortgage on my home. The equity they thought they had built vanished in legal fees and penalties. The Maserati was repossessed before the sun set on that first Monday. The designer clothes, the watches, the handbags were all liquidated by a court-appointed trustee. I did not want the money from those things. I just wanted them gone. I wanted every trace of the theft erased from existence. The marriage did not survive the poverty. As soon as the bank accounts hit zero, Megan filed for divorce. It turns out her love for Ryan was directly tied to his ability to finance her lifestyle. She moved back to Atlanta with her parents, leaving Ryan alone to face the wreckage. I heard she blamed him for everything, claiming she was an innocent victim of his schemes. It was a lie, of course, but Ryan was too broken to fight it. And Ryan, my son, the golden boy who thought he was too good to walk on my floor. I saw him last week. I did not speak to him, but I saw him. He is working at a home improvement store on the east side of town. He was wearing an orange apron, standing behind a cash register, scanning items for customers who did not look him in the eye. He looked older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. He is living in a studio apartment not far from where I used to live. He takes the bus to work. He counts his pennies for lunch. The universe has a poetic sense of humor. He forced me to live like a pauper, and now he is learning exactly what that feels like. I do not feel joy when I see him like that. I feel a quiet, heavy sadness. But I also feel peace because I know he is finally learning the lessons I failed to teach him when he was a child. He is learning the value of a dollar earned through honest work. He is learning that actions have consequences. I am no longer in that dark apartment. I am sitting on the porch of 42 Oakwood Drive. My house. My real house. It took months of legal battles and a lot of money to unwind the reverse mortgage, but we did it. The bank has been paid off. The deed is back in my name. I spent the first week just walking from room to room, touching the walls. I hired a contractor to fix the neglect. The floors have been polished. The walls have been painted. The smell of stale air is gone, replaced by the scent of lemon polish and fresh air. I look out at the front yard. The rose bushes are blooming. They are vibrant red explosions of color against the green leaves. I spent 3 days pruning them, feeding them, watering them back to life. They are resilient, just like me. Valerie is sitting in the rocking chair next to me. She comes to visit every weekend now. She is holding a glossy brochure in her hand. Alaska, she says, tapping the picture of a glacier. The season starts next month, Martin. The suites on the upper deck have balconies where you can watch the whales. I take the brochure from her. I have the money now. I have my pension back plus the recovered assets. I can afford the suite. I can afford the first-class ticket. Let us go, I say. Let us book it today. Valerie smiles and pours us both a cup of tea. It is Earl Grey served in Diane's good china cups. We sit in silence watching the sun go down over the neighborhood. It is a comfortable silence, the kind shared by soldiers who have survived a battle together. I reach into my pocket and pull out a small framed photograph of Diane. It is the one from our 40th anniversary. She is smiling that warm, gentle smile that used to light up my world. I run my thumb over the glass. I talk to her sometimes. I tell her about the roses. I tell her about Valerie. And I tell her about Ryan. I lost a son, Diane, I whisper to the photo. I lost the boy we raised. But I think I found the man I was supposed to be. I found my spine. I found my dignity. I look at the empty driveway where Ryan used to park his car when he came to visit. It is empty now, but it does not feel lonely. It feels clean. Sometimes the hardest lesson a parent can teach is the one that hurts the most. I enabled him for too long. I let him think that love meant no consequences. I let him think that I was a resource, not a person. By stopping him, I did not just save myself. I might have saved his soul. He has a long road ahead of him, but at least now he is walking it on his own 2 feet. I take a sip of tea. It is hot and sweet. The air is cooling down. The streetlights are flickering on. But this time, I am not afraid of the dark. I have my home. I have my sister. And for the first time in 2 years, I have my life back. I lean back in the chair and close my eyes, listening to the wind rustle through the roses. I am Martin Vance. I am a senior engineer. I am a survivor. And tomorrow I am going to book a ticket to Alaska. Financial abuse is a silent epidemic that thrives in the shadows of trust and family obligation. It often comes with a smile and a hug from the people we love the most, making it incredibly difficult to detect until it is too late. The most important lesson here is that trust is not a financial strategy. No matter how much you love someone, you must verify where your money is going and maintain control over your own assets. Setting boundaries and demanding transparency is not an act of distrust. It is an act of self-preservation. Do not let your love for your family blind you to their actions, because true love does not steal your dignity or your security. If this story touched you or made you think about your own situation, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect yourself from family? Let me know in the comments below. Take care of yourselves and never be afraid to stand up for what is yours.